I want to hop on and do an introduction to Greek and Roman mythology and epics. I am providing other videos for you to watch to kind of get to know the stories and the major gods and goddesses, things like that. But I want you to be able to have the stuff that's important for AP literature specifically, things like when the time period is, what literary devices are being used, etc. You do have a paper on Google Classroom that has these categories. So it's called Greek and Roman Mythology and Epics handout, but it has blank spots for you to be able to fill things in from this video. So if you haven't pulled that up yet, make sure you do. We will have one of these at the beginning of every new time period that we look at. As far as the time period specifically, Greek and Roman mythology doesn't have really a set period because it spans so much time. It's really a huge amount of time, particularly because we go from the Greek writers into the Roman writers. They play off of each other, and we have just a very long time period that then other people keep returning to. So you're going to see in many different time periods that they have this call to go back to the times of the Greek and Roman epics, and so that makes it even more difficult to figure out what's going on time-wise. As far as prominent literary devices that you're going to notice, you aren't reading it in the original language that it was written in. So looking at structure and things like that are difficult because we're not reading it in Greek. It's going to look different. But the translators try to do the best they can translating these epic poems into something that resembles the original form. So you are going to still see these devices. The main one being alliteration. Instead of using rhyming, you're going to see alliteration as a way to make have a rhythm or make it flow from point to point. Alliteration also helps with the memorization of it, because you have to think that Greek and Roman mythology is being passed down through oral tradition, and these stories are being told as people travel around, passed down to generations. So alliteration, which is the repetition of sounds at the beginning of words, is going to help with that, and you'll see that in the examples as we go through. The other things that you need to know is allusion. So allusion is not illusion. This is with an A. Allusion is when you reference something else. And this happens all the time. So the Romans are referencing the Greeks are referencing things that they've heard. You will mostly see that everybody else reference the Greeks and the Romans. So even if they aren't referencing something, all of these things are going to be referenced by other people, and so that's an important one to know. The other thing is comedy and tragedy in the very classic sense of the word, tragedy being that everything goes wrong, comedy being that everything's kind of farcical and ends happily at the end. Prominent things that you need to know or topics are that this is going to focus on the pantheon, so the gods and goddesses. Major topics will be love, death, war, peace, human emotions and problems. So the gods are created not necessarily because people truly believed in them. There were people who did believe in these gods and goddesses, but they are more metaphorical. They represent these human struggles and problems, but on a huge scale. So thinking of hyperbole or exaggeration, we're seeing that Zeus has a problem with infidelity. He is quite literally just sleeping with anything and everything. That is a human problem, but brought to the extreme. That's not something you're going to be seeing the majority of people doing, but it is something that people deal with. As far as major historical events, think Roman conquest during this time, Alexander the Great, those things. So the art itself is mimicking kind of these epic things that are happening in history. That's another thing you need to know. So style, syntax, structure, I keep saying epic. Epic poems and plays are the oral history, they're legends. They oftentimes are based on actual events or actual people, but then veer way off into not real. But probably the most famous would be Homer, who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, and those are going to be things that we look at excerpts from. But we're seeing poems, plays, and prose, but mostly poems, and the poems are epic in scale, so they're super long, there's a lot of action, but also a lot of history and things like that. Major Greek writers, we have Aesop, we have Homer, we have Plato and Aristotle, so you will see that a lot of them are philosophers as well. And then we have our Roman writers, Virgil, Horace, Augustus, and Ovid. And we will be looking at excerpts from a bunch of different works from them. But that is your basic overview of what you need to know about Greek and Roman mythology.